Week 3 of the fantasy football season, and he has quarterback started sits every matchup this week. The first one, Thursday Night Football, the New York Giants at the San Francisco 49ers. So right now, the New York Giants, they're going to be without Saquon Barkley, and obviously he's a huge part of this offense and their best player on this team. So right now, Daniel Jones and the Giants, I know, had a great comeback in week 2 at the Arizona Cardinals, down 3 touchdowns, but Jones went out there, threw for over 300 yards and 3 TDs. But this week here in a tough matchup at San Francisco with no Barkley, who's out a few weeks with the ankle sprain, I don't see him doing much, and it could be a long day for Jones like it was in week 1. Now to Brock Purdy. Last week, it wasn't a good game for him, but besides that, he's been good throughout his short NFL career. And this week here, I think he could pick apart this Giant defense. We obviously just saw Joshua Dobbs have a good fantasy day. So Brock Purdy with a lot of good weapons. Home game, short week, Thursday night. I think everything lines up, and he's a start this week. Now to the Chargers at the Minnesota Vikings. There's not much to say about this ball game. Justin Herbert, so far he's been pretty decent in the early going in the Kellen Moore offense. I know people expect more numbers out of him. But obviously, with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams in that offense is the 2 main guys in Austin Eckler, even though we don't know how much longer he's going to be out with no timeline. But anyway, this week here versus a pretty mediocre Minnesota defense, even though they're a work in progress. He's a start this week, and Kirk Cousins so far leads the league in passing yards with 708 in the first 2 ball games. And when you got guys like Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and the emerging rookie Jordan Addison, you're going to put up fantasy points week in, week out. And this Minnesota team's a pass-first team, obviously, as well, with Alexander Madison not doing much. So in this ball game, they're both the starts. Now to the Bills at the Commanders. Josh Allen, nice bounce-back game last week. We know he's a top 3, even top 2 or 1, depending who you prefer in fantasy football. And each and every week, no matter what, he's a start. And this Commanders secondary just isn't that good. And now to the Commanders, Sam Howell. First 2 weeks, he's put up reasonable fantasy points. But this week here versus a great defense in the Buffalo Bills, I think it's going to be a long day here for Howell. Even though in garbage time, he might get some points. But he's a sit for me. Now to the Saints at the Green Bay Packers. Derek Carr. He's been an up-and-down type of quarterback throughout his career. Some games he'll have big games, and some games he won't do much. And right now, this is a pretty tough matchup with the Green Bay Packers. I know he's got pretty good weapons, obviously, with Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, and then Rashid Shaheed emerging. He has the number 3 receiver over there in New Orleans. But right now, versus a Green Bay Packer team that's got a pretty solid secondary and a team coming off a tough loss at Atlanta, I think it's going to be tough for Derek Carr to go into Lambeau, because he's usually a dome quarterback and good weather quarterback throughout his career, playing with the Raiders and then going to the Saints here this season. So he's borderline in deeper leagues. And now Jordan Love, so far the first 2 weeks of his career as a starter, he's been solid as Jordan Love, and he's not even working with that many great weapons. Jaden Reeds came out of nowhere now, the rookie here for this Packer team. Romeo Doubs, he's been pretty decent the first 2 games. And now if Christian Watson could come back, that's another element added to this offense. So I know the Saints defense is pretty solid, but Jordan Love, so far in the early goings, playing great football, and he's a star for me. Now to the Falcons at the Detroit Lions. Desmond Ridder, he's probably one of the worst starting quarterbacks in all the NFL. And right now, even in 2 quarterback leagues, you got to be pretty desperate to have Ridder as a starter this week. I know this Lion defense is an up-and-down type of defense, and a lot of shootouts, obviously, over there in Detroit. But this week, I still can't trust Ridder. He just can't get the ball to his playmakers consistently, and he's a sit. And out to the Lions, Jared Goff. He's been a solid quarterback since Detroit got him over the last couple seasons here. And last week, once again, put in a pretty good game. Him and Josh Reynolds have a great rapport. Ron St. Brown, one of the best receivers in the league. And now you got Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield as well, who added 7 catches in their last ball game. So right now, a lot of good weapons, fast turf indoors. And I think this ball game could be a potential shootout once again. And I got Goff as a start. Now to the Titans at the Cleveland Browns. Ryan Tannehill, he's not a quarterback you could trust, obviously, in fantasy football. I know last week he had a decent game versus the Chargers, but on the road, he's a different quarterback as Tannehill, and he don't really deliver. So this week, versus a pretty solid Browns defense, he's a sit for me. Deshaun Watson, so far in his Brown tenure, it's been an up and down type of way, but mostly downs in terms of putting up points and making plays. And this Brown team, they got all the weapons, no doubt about it. I know Nick Chubb's out for the season with a devastating knee injury, but right now, Jerome Ford looks like a running back that can make plays out of the backfield there for this Brown team. It wouldn't be surprising to me, time of recording this, that Kareem Hunt is brought back in since he's still on the free agent market and played with the Browns the last few seasons. But anyway, Watson here versus Tennessee defense that gives up a lot of passing yards over the last few seasons. I think bounces back and could have a top 12 performance. He's a start now to the Texans at the Jacksonville Jaguars. CJ Stroud so far the first 2 games, it's been a mixed bag of results, but last week he went for 384 yards in that ball game and 2 touchdowns. But I know obviously it was a lot of garbage time versus the Indianapolis Colts. And now you got the Jacksonville Jaguars here, Jay Stroud. So the rookie, he's a borderline option for me. I know he's out there in tons of fantasy leagues right now, but some guys are emerging in this offense. Nico Collins, he's breaking out. Robert Woods so far a good veteran signing, and the rookie Tank Dell is explosive as well and can make some plays. So this week here in a division matchup where it could be a tight game for the most part, or maybe Jacksonville finally gets going and runs away with this one early. Either way, Stroud's a guy to keep on the radar, but he's borderline for me. Now Trevor Lawrence, he's a start for me this week. Week 1, he had a pretty solid ball game. Week 2, we didn't see much out of him. I know 3 passes in the back of the end zone with close plays, but Calvin Ridley couldn't come down with 1, and Zay Jones just missed putting the feed in 2 of them. But he's a start for me versus a pretty weak defense. He's got great weapons, like I said, Ridley, Christian Kirk, who had a monster game last week, Travis Etienne out of the backfield, and he's a start for me. Now to the Patriots at the Jets, pretty straightforward. This one is Mac Jones, 1 good game, 1 mediocre game, and this week he's versus one of the better defenses in the league here. This is going to be a low-scoring game, I think, mid-teens, low 20s at best between these 2 teams. We know it's a division rival. I know Belichick's got the best of this New York Jet team over the last 10, 15 years. But anyway, I don't see Mac Jones doing much with not many receivers on this roster. And he's a sit for me. And Zach Wilson, I think he's one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league here. Last week threw 3 interceptions. I know he hit Gary Wilson on a nice slant route, but that was pretty much all Wilson taking it to the house after catching that 15 yards and going. But anyway, this week here, you know, New England's got a good game plan. They beat Zach Wilson last season as well, this Patriot team. And Belichick, you know he's going to write up some plays. I know Patriots are 0-2, but like I said, this is going to be a defensive battle. And both quarterbacks are sits. Now to the Broncos at the Dolphins. This could be a mini shootout over there in Miami. The home opener for the Dolphins, 2-0. Broncos coming in 0-2. Russell Wilson so far in this Sean Payton offense has actually put up some fantasy points. He put up 20 points in week 1, and then last week over 30 fantasy points. So this week here, Russell Wilson to start. Jerry Jeudy back in the lineup. Cortland Sutton looked decent towards the end of the game. And Marvin Mims came out of nowhere, and the rookie Johnson as well. So far, some weapons on this offense over here in Denver. And this could be a ball game they're trailing early and often, where they got to drop back and throw the football a whole lot. So Russell Wilson, he's definitely a top 15 option this week in a start. He's a start for me this week. I could see this offense exploding in this one. We just saw Sam Howell throw over 275 yards versus this defense. So right now with Tyreek Hill, going to have a monster season once again. I know Jalen Waddle might not play in this ball game with a concussion, but I don't think it matters, to be honest. So Tua, he's a top quarterback so far in fantasy, and he's a start once again this week. Now to the Colts at the Ravens, pretty straightforward. Anthony Richardson, concussion protocol, might not play. Even if he does, it's a very tough matchup for the rookie at the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. So that's a sit. And Gardner Minshew, if he does start as well, we know he's had some games throughout his career, but you can't trust him on the road in a tough ball game and a team with not a lot of weapons on the outside for the Colts. So he's a sit for me. Lamar Jackson could be an MVP type of season once again here for Lamar, where he's motivated. He got his contract finally, and they got some help around them over here. Signing Zay Flowers, signing Odell Beckham, even though he's hurt with the ankle injury, and even Nelson Aguilar we saw make some plays. So Lamar Jackson, he's a start for me, and like I said, definitely could be an MVP candidate this year. Now to the Panthers at the Seattle Seahawks. Bryce Young, so far the first 2 games, we really haven't seen much out of him, even though he's got good poise in the pocket, can make some plays with his legs, but also not a lot on that offense over there in Carolina. Adam Thielen, the number 1 wide receiver, but we know his better days are behind him. And this Seattle defense I know isn't all that great, but Bryce Young going over there, 12th man in Seattle, I can't trust him. And it's still a tough matchup for a rookie. Now Geno Smith, last week a nice bounce-back ball game for Geno, and they got great weapons, obviously, as a Seattle team, so I think he could pick apart this Panthers secondary over there in Seattle. So he's a start. When you got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Smith Najaba the rookie. Those are great weapons on the offense. Noah Fant, he actually got going a little bit in the ball game. And Geno's a start for me. Now to the Bears at the Kansas City Chiefs. So Justin Fields, yes, I'm going to give him the nod in this ball game. But so far, the first 2 weeks, Fields, he hasn't looked good at all. Or maybe last season could have been a little fluky with all those rushing yards, rushing over 1,000 yards. Because right now, he's not getting out of the pocket really, extending plays. He's holding on to the football a lot. Here's Justin Fields. And right now, if he has another bad week, this definitely could be a starting quarterback on the fringe, or a guy you just sit out right now. To the Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes re-upping with a different extension, making big money once again. And he's a start each and every week. I know the first 2 weeks we haven't seen those monster numbers out of Mahomes, but sometimes it takes him a little bit to warm up, and when it's all said and done by season's end, he'll be one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best in fantasy. So he's a start, obviously, each and every week. Now to the Cowboys at the Arizona Cardinals. Dak Prescott coming off a great game, I would say, in terms of fantasy numbers, at a very tough New York Jet defense that I believe is the top 5 defense in the league, where Prescott went for 255 yards and 2 touchdowns. CeeDee Lamb, he had a monster ball game. And this week here, this Arizona defense obviously can't stop anyone. They made Daniel Jones look like Peyton Manning in the second half of that ball game. So Dak Prescott, when you got a CeeDee Lamb, hopefully Brandon Cooks could come back for him. He's a start this week, even though this ball game could get out of hand early where Dak doesn't have to do much, but I'll give him a start this week. And Joshua Dobbs, last week he looked pretty good versus the New York Giants, but this week here versus arguably the best defense in pro football, there's no way I'm going to trust Joshua Dobbs. Most of the Cardinals are going to be sits this week here. With Dobbs, he might be running for his life. This pass rush is vicious over there for this Dallas Cowboy team, and this week you can't trust him. And obviously he's not a quarterback owned in leagues as well. Now to the Steelers at the Vegas Raiders, both quarterbacks, I just don't like the outlook for them. Kenny Pickett, he took a beating in that week 2 victory versus the Cleveland Browns. But right now, I know it's a pretty decent matchup on paper at the Vegas Raiders where you could throw all over him. But right now, Kenny Pickett, he's just a tough quarterback to trust, obviously. Deontay Johnson, he's out 4 weeks going on injured reserve. So he was a little tough for him, even though George Pickens stepped up and had a good ball game. But in this situation on the road, young quarterback, and so far inconsistent, he's a sit-in. Jimmy Garoppolo, I know they got the weapons over there for this Vegas Raider team, but Jimmy G's not really a quarterback. Really a quarterback that has fantasy value, in my opinion, is Jimmy Garoppolo. I know you got Devontae Adams. He escaped a big injury after that ball game in week 2 with Buffalo, but right now Jimmy Garoppolo, even in the home opener, is not a quarterback I could trust here for this Raider team in fantasy football. Now to the Eagles at the Tampa Bay Bucks. Jalen Hurts, he's a start each and every week. Great offense, great weapons, and he's just going to put up his fantasy points, either if it's passing or like we saw last week, 2 rushing touchdowns from the goal line. So he's a start. Baker Mayfield, the sit, even though Baker, the first 2 ball games, he's led this team, and he's looked good, Baker Mayfield, in both ball games here. Him and Mike Evans got crazy chemistry in the early going. But right now, this Eagle defense, so far I know they've given up a lot of points in terms of comparing to what you thought they would give up, especially versus the Patriots, giving up 20 points. And then last week versus the Vikings, giving up 28 points. But anyway, I think this week this defense buckles down. And this Tampa Bay offensive line isn't all that great, so Baker could be in for a long day and he's a sit this week. Now, Los Angeles Rams at the Cincinnati Bengals, Monday Night Football. Matthew Stafford's a sit for me this week. I know Matthew Stafford so far has looked good. Puka Nacua, he's taken the league by storm in the first 2 games of his NFL career. But right here, tough situation, Monday Night Football. Cincinnati, they need a win desperately, obviously, after losing the first 2 ball games to division rivals. And I think this one, they're going to make it tough here for Matthew Stafford a little bit, is this Cincinnati Bengal team. So Stafford's a sit for me, unless you're in the deepest of leagues, 2 quarterback leagues. And now to the Bengals side of things, Joe Burrow, if he does play in this game so far, time of recording this, we haven't got any word if Joe Burrow is going to play or not, but the calf injury is pretty serious, obviously, where there were reports in preseason that Joe Burrow should sit out to week 3 or 4, but now re-aggravating the calf. You saw him limping in that ball game versus the Ravens, and that's obviously not good, but if Burrow's playing, I'm still putting him in the starting lineup. You put a high pick on him, obviously, and this is a pretty good matchup versus the Rams in terms of moving the football and a pretty poorish secondary, but if you don't play in, Jake Browning is going to start this game. He's obviously a sit for me because we don't know what we're going to expect from Browning. I know they got great weapons, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, even though so far Jamar Chase, he's off to a slow start here but you can't trust Browning in this situation, and you got to be in a desperation or deepest of leagues. That's quarterbacks every matchup. Start, sit for week 3 of the fantasy football season.